Hi there, by the end of this video you'll have made this calculator user interface that you see on screen. It doesn't currently work with any sort of functions, it's simply just made with CSS Grid. And that's really important because what we've made here is a calculator with CSS Grid with very little code, and we'll be looking at that throughout this video. So I'm also using Angular at this point in time, but you can use whatever you want. You don't even need to use a JavaScript framework. It just so happens that I was building a calculator with Angular and using CSS Grid, so let's take a look at this project. So let's build a new project with the Angular CLI by saying ng new, and I'm going to call this ng-calc. This may take a couple of minutes to download and install the dependencies. Once that has completed, we can cd into ng-calc, and of course open this up inside of our editor and use ng-serve to display this inside of the browser. When it comes to actually laying out our application, there are many ways that we can do this. I'm going to simply make an array that has all of the things that I want my calculator to contain. The interface of the array will have an object that has a name that will have the item of the calculator, so this will be a button, and whether it is an operator or not. I'm going to go through and add all of the items that I want to use inside of my calculator. So as you can see, we now have an array that contains everything, such as the clear operators, things like 7, 8, and 9 for our numbers, multiplication, subtraction, and much more. I've also specified whether that thing is an operator or whether it's simply just a number. Like I said, you don't even have to use an array for this, you could simply just put all these items in the DOM. I'll now be navigating over to appcomponent.html and I'll remove everything inside of that. Inside of here I want a div with the class of calculator. Then we'll have a div with the class of grid wrapper. And essentially I want our calculator to have a head, so let's make another div with the class of head, and this will contain all of the commands that maybe we've done. After that, underneath I want the result, and then underneath this I want our calculator buttons. So we can do here an ng4, and we can say let's C of calc, and we can put in the c.name. So fairly standard, we have a calculator with the buttons like so, the commands on top, and our result. At the moment everything is pretty standard, we haven't really done anything with CSS Grid. Before we jump into CSS Grid, I'm going to give this a class of operator, and then afterwards we'll come back and switch this depending on whether it's a number or operator. So let's jump into the CSS Grid. And that'll be at app.component.css. And we'll start with our grid wrapper. We'll use display grid. And one of the easiest ways to determine which items go where is by using what's known as grid template areas. And this allows us to define areas of our grid by name. So I'm going to put it as an empty string for now, and I'm going to make the head classes. And I'm also going to give this result here a class of result. So we should have the head, result, and operator class inside of our grid wrapper. So if we also put result, we can then specify that we want the head to occupy the grid area of head and the result to occupy the grid area of result. And finally, all we now need to do is say that we want the head to take up 4 columns. After that, we want the result to take up 4 columns. And the rest of our grid now fits in place. So we could specify again if we wanted to. That maybe now we wanted the operator to have its own set of columns. It doesn't look like we would have to in this instance, but we can if we want. And this is where it starts to get very interesting, because now we have this UI that we can either make larger or smaller, and it will always keep that same ratio no matter what. So let's start applying a little bit of styling to this. Let's give our wrapper a background color. I'm also going to give this some padding. and we'll give it a little box shadow. Next, we can define a background color for our head area. We can then change the color to be something like white. If we wanted to, we could dim this down a small amount. We could add the text align to be right, and maybe add some padding. So that allows us to keep track of the previous commands here at the top. Our result area can be quite similar. Perhaps we can add text align of right again. Can apply this a background color and maybe some padding of 10 pixels. Add a color and change the font size. And we're starting to find ourselves having a decent calculator. But at this point in time, we haven't styled the buttons, and the buttons aren't really in the correct location. So let's make ourselves a new class, one for number and one for operator. We can give the operator the text align of center, and that does make all of our buttons currently go in the center. So let's do the same for numbers. And we'll give our operator a background color of something like a nice red. And when it comes through, we'll give our numbers a background color of a nice blue. So how do we make the numbers appear? Well, the way that we do that is by adding an ng class. So let's add an ng class instead of a class. And we will apply the operator class when we have a c.operator. Otherwise, we'll apply the number class when we don't. Notice how when we save our file, we then have this blue for our numbers, and our operators are all red. And the best way to add padding elements, or rather a gap to our grid, is by simply going back to our wrapper and adding a grid-gap of 10 pixels. If you find that that's too much, we could add 5 pixels instead. And there we have it, we've built ourselves a nice little calculator with CSS Grid. No matter how large or small we make this project, it always looks the same. And of course we could, if we wanted to, add a .calculator. And we could add something maybe like the max width of 200 pixels and the margin of auto. And this will stick our calculator in the middle of the screen. The only issue with CSS Grid at this point in time is that it isn't widely supported in older browsers. So make sure to be especially careful where you actually use this. But aside from that, it's been a fun little project creating this calculator. Let me know what you think inside of the comments section below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated for more awesome projects. And of course, check out paulhalliday.io for more courses and free content. Until next time, I'll see you soon in my next video.